Hello everybody, this is Joe. How's everything going today? Sorry about the puppy. We're here going to talk about American 1760s. And we'll talk about 1760 through 62, 63, right around there. I have a map of the United States during the colonial period. And what I want to show you guys is, at this time here, we all know the 13 colonies, what's happened here. But let's look at this map together. Let's take a look at this and see what we have here. And the important thing about this map here, it kind of tells you what's going on in the United States. Obviously, at this time, we all know from east to west into the body of the country, from east to west, Pacific Ocean to the Atlantic Ocean and the Gulf of America and everything in between there. But we're going to talk about the happenings of America at the period of time, what's going on, how the country's like looking at the situation, what's happening with England, the French-American War, all this stuff here. So we'll be here about half hour or so, or thereabouts. So let's get started. The first thing we got to look at is what's happening in this period of time. At this period of time, one of the most important things is the French and Indian War is ending. Okay, it's in 1760. The French and Indian War is ending, and the French lost. Okay, which means what? Which means Britain's gaining more territory. It's gaining more land. Britain's getting bigger. Now, if you look here, if you look along here, along the map here, you'll notice this is the Mississippi River. Now, everything coming along the Mississippi River is going to be taken over by the British. Okay, and now this means here we got the Canadian Providence here. Now, the period of time, if I'm not mistaken, because I am an amateur historian, self-taught, that Canada was a British possession, if I'm not mistaken. I could be wrong on that, but I'll double check myself. So we're gaining this territory here, okay, of the province of Quebec and all the stuff in the French and Indian Wars. And so the important thing about here is that the French and Indian Wars did two things. One, it established America stronger for the British, which grew extensively for this period of time. It grew extensively in size, and don't forget population. We got New York, Pennsylvania, Philadelphia, Boston, New York. The cities now that you know it's large, is large then also. It's growing. So the French and Indian Wars did what besides gained more land, more people, more resources for the British. But also during this period of time, we're having tensions here in Florida with the Spaniards, okay, and in Spain, okay. Now, at this period of time, there is tensions in the colonies related to the growing discontent of the British rule, okay. Now, the British rule has been going on since 100 years. Now, everybody here in America at this period of time has so far detached from their mother country. Almost everybody has never been to England, and their grandfathers and grandmothers, or great-grandmothers and grandmothers, were in England at the time. So far back, this is 1760 now, 1760 to 62, 63, okay? So this in America right now is the descent of the colonists against the mother country. This is beginning early embers of the Revolutionary War period, okay? Now, another important aspect of this is, when you think about it, you have Spain, like we just talked about a few minutes ago, okay? Has all these large possessions here. Now, you know what happened at the Alamo and the war with Mexico in 1846 from the Alamo. You know what happened here in the United States got all this land through the Treaty of Guadalupe. But you look what they have here now. Everything from west of the Mississippi River is Spanish land, is Spanish possessions. Now that does not mean Mexico. Okay. Now that's another thing I have to look at, because I know Mexico was in charge. Santa Ana, Mexico. This is Mexican land. We had a war with Mexico. But you have to look at, does that mean Spanish possessions was Spain, or Spanish possessions Mexico? Okay. There's different. The Aztecs and all this stuff here, and okay. Now we know that Spain claimed Florida. We know that. But what is Spain getting here? Now we look over here in the Oregon Territory. Okay, let's move this over here. We look at the Oregon Territory. This is Great Britain, Russia. Okay. Now the Oregon Territory is going to come up in this 1876 Hills versus Tilden presidential race, any Reconstruction, and because Hayes had the votes, Tilden had the popular vote, but Hayes was one electoral college vote short to get the win. So that's very interesting in American history here. In the Oregon Territory, but we'll get to that when we talk about the presidential election in 1876. So stick around, my friends. Okay, so let's look at this and look at this map here, and let's go over this. What we're looking at here is the map, 1760s, 1770s. But the interesting aspect here is now we actually have now Indian country here. Okay. Now, this Indian country is going to be the same country, Indian country, is going to be used in the 1830s through the Supreme Court case, Trail of Tears with Andrew Jackson as president. We will move into up in here, because you look at this is Texas here, it'll be up in here, this is Oklahoma right here. Okay? If you look here, this is Oklahoma here. This will be eventually will be the Indian Territory here. And all the Indians from here, from Georgia up, will be moved over to Oklahoma Territory. But the interesting thing about this is French and Indian wars have ended. Okay? But now Britain, Spain, Mexico, Canada have to accept the Indians here as part of the country. Okay? As part of the country. They have their own country here. Now, their country is going to go over, it's going to be like, if you look at these states here, this will be Florida, the Panhandle, you got Alabama, Georgia, Alabama, Mississippi, Louisiana, West Virginia, Virginia. So you look at all these states here. Now, the important thing about this is, along the eastern seaboard here, this right here, along the eastern seaboard, I hope you guys can see this. Along the eastern seaboard, you're going to see a lot of different important things here. You're going to see trade. You're going to see slave trade. You're going to see trade of molasses. You're going to see trade of tobacco. You're going to see trade between other states. You're going to see all this right here is all developed along the eastern seaboard here. But inlet further in, it's all destined and barren. But England wants to expand, but not too much, because at this time King George III has passed away. Let me check my notes. Yeah, King George II, okay, and that's King George III. Now, King George III is a king that we're going to know during the Revolutionary War period, okay, King George III, okay, and so 1760 is a pivotal time in American history. Okay? As I just said, Americans are getting smarter. Americans are getting disconnected with England. Even though England is in charge, they're British subject, but they're so far disconnected. Okay? Like if somebody asks me, are you a Californian or you're an American? I'm an American, okay? But I live in California. I'm so far detached from the mother country, as they say, the Washington, D.C., the capital of the country, like the big land of the country, the capital. I'm 3,000 plus miles away. The colonists are so far away from England, they have no conception of it. They're so far away. A ship going back and forth would take weeks, if not a month. And remember, George Washington, as a child, got bad acne and really got sick traveling back to England as a child. So we have George III, we have the French and Indian Wars ending, we have America's population growing, we have the Indian territories, the Indians building up their own area, we have Spain and Florida, Russia and Britain up in Oregon, and the Spanish possessions throughout the country, other than that territory up in the northern areas. And we have skirmishes throughout the whole countries. The countryside, everything, there's lawlessness, there's no much law out there. There's there's nothing much that law can control out there. So everybody's pretty much on their own. So we have absolute lawlessness throughout the Spanish possessions, throughout the whole countryside, and we have the slave trade, slavery going on at this time. So this is a pivotal time in America, as I just said. Now, what I also want to talk to you about is about the British control of America. Now, we can go back to, now I have my, as I spoke to you guys before, I have my quotes here, my Bartlett quotations. Now, if we look at Benjamin Franklin in the early 1750s, he talks about wanting to develop right here, this book here, okay? Sorry, this book here, and a great selected. Now this is like so Benjamin Franklin is talking about developing the United States of America in 1730, 35. Because remember, Franklin was born in the early 17th century. Okay, like he's about the same age, I would think, as he might be a little younger than George Washington. Okay, but here we have Benjamin Franklin. You see this article here. It's right here. But Benjamin Franklin's now here's an important aspect, because we're talking about the French and Indian War. Let me read a couple sentences here about Benjamin Franklin and the founding of the United States and the Albany Plan for the Union. Now remember, there was the different plans during the Constitutional Convention. Okay, we'll talk about that when we do that again. It says, now this is really interesting. I'm not going to take up too much of you guys' time, but let me read a little tidbit out of this book of American documents. The problem with, let me begin here. The problem with defense on the eve of the French and Indian War, led by the English Board of Trade, called for Congress in American colonies in 1754, 7 colonies, Connecticut, Maryland, New Hampshire, New York, Pennsylvania, and Rhode Island, as delegates to Albany. Remember, Albany was the sitting capital of America at the time, with instructions to work on plans to joint defense measures. For it was thought that without collective effort, it would be no match for the French. Now, at this period of time, the French and the British had the strongest armies out there, and they were very well armed, and their ships and their navies are pretty good. So let me go for this here, a few minutes. The delegates went a little further, and so-called Albany Plan of Union was drawn by the Pennsylvania delegates. Benjamin Franklin provided authority to levy taxes and pay to the central treasury, neither the crown or its under its authority, or or connive the colony's assemblance. I don't have that much language, that's why I'm kind of stumbling a little bit. So what we're having here is the beginning of the French and Indian Wars. We're having Benjamin Franklin here wanting to create a country. And England wanted to create a country also, but remember, Patrick Henry is going to say a few years down the line, no taxation without representation. Okay? So what's happening here? Benjamin Franklin in here, he wants to create a country. William Penn wants to create a country, the founder of Pennsylvania. He wants to create a country. But England's okay with it in here. But the problem is, they're not going to allow Americans to take taxes or levy taxes. That's only for the king to do. So it doesn't get passed. Okay? And, okay, now let me just read a few little parts here. It is proposed that humble application be made to the Act of Parliament of the Great Britain by virtue of one general government made before America, including all said colonies within and which under the government of each colony may retain a represent the Constitution except particular and charged directed by the said act therefore as follows, and explains the act, and that's a really in-depth deal. But why do we have this act in 1754? Because of the French and Indian War. And then only a few years later they're going to have the Declaration of Independence in 1776, and there's going to be a war to 1783, and the important aspect of all this is going to be what? If Britain would have allowed America in 1754 to become its own independent nation and be able to tax itself and regulate itself, would it ever left the mother country? You know? You see what I'm trying to say here? Now, eventually America would have formed its own country. It would not have kept as a colonies of Great Britain. And all this we look at and all this we understand is like, oh, okay, wow, look at this. Now we also have, let me double check my record here, what I'm doing. Like we just talked about a few minutes ago. The prosperity in America, the growing disdain from the mother country, not disdain, but distance. They want the distance from the country, their own individual country. They want to develop their own nation. Just like 5 years before, this is why we thought this could happen. This is why we know it will happen. And the important thing about this is, other people know. So next time we come in here in a couple of days, we're going to talk about 1762 through 1765 and look at some of the laws, some of the regulations, the tax. Because remember, we have the French and Indian Wars. We also have Britain and France in wars in Europe. And King George III is just taking power. He wants to show his hand. And also we have one important thing here that we have to look at. It's this here. I didn't want to take a second. This right here. This is the slave testimony in the 1760s and before. There's descent of slaves and slave training and in the colonies and in America and everywhere else. And now remember, at this period of time, if I'm not mistaken, Britain banned slave trade in the UK. I'm not sure the exact dates, but it was banned, and during this, and if you look at during this period of time, you're going to find and see a lot of stories in here. Now, here, let me preface this. Now, this book here it's called Slave Testimony, and it's a really interesting book. And this book was published in 1979. Now, that's recent. That's like right around the corner. But the interesting thing here, here's the interesting thing. I want to talk to you guys about this this book. There's a long introduction here, and we should read the introduction. Now here's letters to slavery from 1736. Okay, so we have document letters 1736. Okay, now if you go in here, if you go in here and look at this, now if you look at this letter here, so you see this letter. I know you can't see it, but I'm going to talk about it. You see this letter here, right here, okay, in here. Now the important thing here to see that with this letter, I'll let you just look at the beginning of it, if possible. Probably won't be able to see it. But what I'm trying to show here is we also do something important. When we research and talk about something, we have to make sure it's authentic. Okay? So we go back, we know Dred Scott is authentic. There's a Supreme Court case for it. We know the Constitutional Convention is authentic because it happened and they have documents. We know that the Dred Scott case happened, like I just said. We know this happened. We know Pearl Harbor happened. We know all this stuff happened. But if we look at this record, and I'm going to read a sentence out of this book for you. Historians have long given. Okay, where am I at here? Now, okay. I'm going to read this first sentence here. Job Ben. Okay. It's called Job Ben Solomon's to Jacob Smith. And Yakino is now in the River Cambia on January 27, 1835. Sir, this is to acquaint you to my safe arrival and return here from Rotunda being conducted safe. Oh wait, this requires that my safe arrival and return here from Rotunda being conducted safe and used the great civility of all the way, which was owing to respect and regard the natives for every part here have for the company, and being conducted one white man only, which was the governor's nephew, and the company's behalf, which made no little noise, and was much service to me, and my wives got another husband in the room. So I'm reading this book, I'm reading this thing about this guy, okay, and this is the person here, okay. Now you ask me why am I talking about slavery, I'm talking about this, but during this period of time we're dealing with slavery, so we have to authenticate everything here. So the thing about this is, how do we know that this person actually lived? How do we know this person actually wrote this letter? And how do we know if this person's letter was actually preserved, and if it was? Now, as you know, slaves at the period of time were not allowed to read or write, okay? But they could speak. So we have to authenticate everything, just like we're doing right now. We know King George III came a king because his father died. We know the French Indian Wars has just ended. We know that America's expanding. The British is getting more bold with the colonies. The colonies are getting more distant and have more disdain to the crown. We know there's issues with Spain, with Spanish Florida, Indian territories. Country wants to expand. Remember, don't forget, in the Northwest Ordinance in 1787, we gained Ohio and all this up in the northern passage up north. During the Constitutional Convention. So everything you're looking at here, you got to take it not as a grain of salt, but you got to like look at this. What did George Washington? Now you have to go congressional record. Okay, you have these records. You have to go like, okay, what happened? Is there any written notes? Who put this together? How is this like? What is the evidence of this? So America in 1760s. We're not talking too much about life. There was farm life. There was like people doing their thing, but the important thing about this in 1760 was what? Better lives. People were improving their lives. The cotton gin hadn't been invented yet, if I'm not mistaken. They're still like out there in the farm, but they're doing well. And it says population growth and economic prosperity. And let me read this. 30 colonies. Some of these notes here. I'll read that to you. 30 colonies experienced significant population growth and economic expansion and feel like I just said a few minutes ago, Philadelphia, Boston, New York, because of the ports of entry. Okay, and one of the things I also want to talk about is before we end our history lesson today, is we're seeing something here in 1760 that is like right before the Revolutionary War period. Okay, so 1760 is 14 years before anything really happened. If I'm not mistaken, there was battles in the Revolutionary War before the Declaration of Independence, because that was the reason why we had the Declaration of Independence. You know, so the Declaration of Independence is a long way off, but the people, and one of the most important thing is the leaders are distant. The distance they have from the mother country. Like, remember, if you wanted anything, you would have to petition. If you wanted anything, you would have to petition the mother country. Okay? For any type of settlement, or any type of regression, or anything you needed, you had to go to the mother country. And it took weeks and months to get any answers, and we didn't like that. So the important thing to look about this is America's growing. America's growing away from the king. America's growing away from the colonial rule, but it's still during the colonial rule because people are going about their lives. They're not like, oh no, I don't like the British. You know, only took those few delegates to be concerned about America, like Franklin and Adams and the leaders, you know, John Jay and Hamilton. Those guys are the ones who caused America to look at this. You know, because you look right here, the British government issued a proclamation against settlement of Indian lands of reflecting growth concerning Native American rights and potential conflict. Okay, so the Indians, I know we're changing the subject for a second, but we're sticking on the same job. See, the Indians are now being controlled by the British, not the Americans. Okay, here's another thing here. While colonies, some notes I took and wrote down myself, just want to read them to you what I'm looking at. While colonies have been benefited from the war effort, the British government's subsequent policies, particularly related to taxation, western expansion, began to spark discomfort along the colonists. Okay? Remember, Patrick Henry, taxation with no representation. Remember, western expansion. See, if I'm not mistaken, Britain was in control of Canada, if I'm not mistaken, or that was that French. I could be wrong on that. I want to double check myself. But see, you remember during James Monroe presidency, we had Manifest Destiny. Okay? And if you read the Monroe Doctrine, I'll talk about that. The king wants to expand America, the colonies, grow the colonies, expand out. But the important problem is the colonists didn't want that. They didn't want to expand under the Brit and the king rule. But we knew what was going on. Remember, 1803, we're going to have the Lewis and Clark Exposition after Thomas Jefferson did Louisiana Purchase. And they say that was unconstitutional at the period of time. But that's up for debate, and it could have been, you know, something to look at. So I want to appreciate, and the close up on it today is, I want to thank you very much. We'll touch base a little bit more again on 1762 through 1763 to 65 in our next discussion, my friends. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. And have a good day. Thank you so much.